Look, we have to do this. We don't have the money for her anymore. We can't take care of her any longer.
Maybe someone will find her and give her a good home.
You would never think of abandoning your own child in an unfamiliar and dangerous setting with no food or shelter. Why then would you abandon your pet? Abandoned animals have feelings as well and suffer tremendously with a very poor chance of survival. Okay, gang, welcome to my all-new instructional video for the Mothman. This kit is a fantastic kit. It was released by Pegasus Hobbies, and it was sculpted by none other than Jeff Yagher. The box art was done, by the way, by Chris White. You may recall Chris did a lot of the box art for Polar Lights kits back in the day. So the first order of business, of course, is to open the box and inspect the parts as well as the instruction sheet. The best thing to do, of course, is to leave all the parts on the sprues and in the bags until you've had a chance to really and truly examine the instruction booklet or the instruction sheet. This way you can familiarize yourself with the kit so you know what you're in for. Now, this kit is broken down into roughly 37, 40 parts, something like that. Not very many parts, so this is really a rather nice beginner kit. So as you can see, I've taken out the instruction manual and I'm looking everything over. And you also, at the same time, you want to inspect the parts. Don't remove any parts from the sprues just yet. You just want to check everything over, make sure you know where all the parts are located and their numbers, because obviously that's going to be important when you begin to assemble your kit. So anyway, here's the legs and the arms, and you can see here the first step, of course, is doing the arms and the hands and the legs. So that's what I'm going to work on first. And there's the part number. Usually they're located on the sprue right near the part. And instead of using a hobby knife or just breaking the parts off, I use a pair of sprue cutters. These are really nice because you can get a nice clean cut. Always be careful when you're using any sort of sharp tools, hobby knives, nippers, anything like that. So here I'm taking the parts out that I need for the arms, and I'm looking everything over. And when you go to cut the parts from the sprues, try and cut the parts as flush as you can to the part. Sometimes this is possible and sometimes it's not. Now I'm electing to use Tamiya Extra Thin Model Cement. Now a lot of you may know, of course, but some of you may not, that model glue really isn't exactly a glue. It's a solvent that softens the plastic. You can also opt to use super glue. However, if you're beginning, I would stay away from the super glue just yet, because we don't want to glue any fingers or other body parts together. And you always want to test fit the pieces just to make sure. You know, manufacturers, they spend usually a great deal of time in engineering these parts, but you always want to double check just to make sure that the parts are going to fit properly. Now, these parts contain a little track or rim and also a few holes and pins. So you just want to make sure what you're looking at here and where you're going to apply your glue. I usually apply it around the perimeter as well as the holes where the pins are going to go, and then hold it for a few seconds. The glue will usually begin to bond after that. And then I take a hobby knife and I scrape the seam a little bit to help eliminate the seam. You can also come back with an emery board or some light sandpaper, that sort of thing, and you just want to try to eliminate the seam as much as possible. Of course, when you're dealing with texture like fur or anything like that, it's a little tricky because you've got to try to be careful not to obliterate all that detail. And here the one hand is done. Now I went ahead and I finished both hands, and here I'm going to work on the one leg. Same procedure. This other leg, of course, there was a lot of sprue left on the part, and that had to be removed. So again, I used the nippers. I ended up using the hobby knife as well to get it down to the very edge of the part. You just want to work as carefully as you can, and whatever you do, don't cut any fingers. The one leg, both halves of the leg contained quite a bit of sprue. These were in the bag with the base, and they weren't even on the sprue. The manufacturer, I guess, had gone ahead and cut these parts off of the sprue. Like I said, you just want to try to get it cut as close as you possibly can. Sometimes these little bits of sprue can even interfere in trying to bring two pieces together. Sometimes it'll leave a gap. So again, you just want to try to cut it as close as you can. And if you have to, come back with your hobby knife or sandpaper and file it down just to make sure that none of that sprue is on the edge where it glues. If you have any gaps, you want to use a good putty. I don't buy anything real expensive. As a matter of fact, I just use Bondo, and I apply that with a toothpick. Try to keep it localized where the seam is. You simply let the Bondo dry for several hours, and in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and assemble the torso and the head. So the torso, again, just like the legs and the arms, are in halves. And here, I did have a little bit of a problem gluing the body together, so I ended up having to put some rubber bands on to act as clamps. And I still had a few seams, or a few gaps rather. You're always going to have seams with a plastic kit. And now I decided to go ahead and work on the base. So while I'm letting all those other parts dry and set up, I'm going to work on the base. On the one half of the base, they had holes for pins, but on the other half, where the pins would be, there were virtually no pins. I don't know if it was a defect in the particular kit I had or what, but anyway, there is a track running along there which will help you guide it together with the glue, and you can always set both halves down on the work surface when you have them glued together, and that'll even everything right up. And that's pretty much all I really did. You know, at this point, the pins weren't really a huge deal anyway, so I didn't have to worry about that. Now the head for the body, again, I had a couple of gaps here and there. And you're dealing with this texture. So, what do you do? Well, I didn't want to use a lot of Bondo and create a problem where there would be no texture. So once all this was completely dry, I ended up using some Magic Sculpt, and I'll get into that a little later. There was quite a gap there on that one side of the head. Okay, here the Bondo is set, and I have pretty much gotten rid of the majority of it except where it was in the cracks. I could have made a texture stamp and replaced all of that texture, but I opted not to do that. Now, when it came to fitting the feet to the base, boy, that was another problem. I have a pet peeve, whereas if feet don't properly set into a base, I just can't stand it. So here's where I pulled out the Magic Sculpt. Now, Magic Sculpt is a 2-part epoxy putty that is pretty much water soluble. And all you do is you take a little bit of part A and a little bit of part B, the resin and the hardener, and you just simply knead it together until it's a uniform color. It's rather soft and it kneads in no time at all. And then once you have it all kneaded together in a solid, you simply roll it out in a little bead and you just start pressing it. Wet the surface and your finger. And as you can see here, I used that around the head because I went back with a toothpick and I replaced some of that texture. It was kind of bad there and I wanted all that fur texture to stand out. So I ended up using Magic Sculpt and a toothpick as a sculpting tool. And then if the lines are too sharp, you can come back with a little bit of water and a brush and brush it, and it'll soften the lines, which will tend to look a little bit more like the kit. Now, I had a couple of seams I had to take care of. That tab, what seemed to be a little bit of a problem, and I didn't necessarily want to remove that tab, but I pressed it. I mixed up some Magic Sculpt. Now, see, as you can see here, it doesn't quite fit right, doesn't quite line up. It's almost like it's sitting above the surface. And that just drives me nuts. This one the same way. It's almost like the foot, or the toes didn't even follow the contour of the tree stump. See, that to me is kind of a poor fit. So I mixed up some more Magic Sculpt, and I decided to build those areas up on the tree stump. And then all I did was I simply pressed the feet. I made sure there was plenty of water on the bottoms of the feet. You want to moisten them good. And then just simply press that in place. And then once you have those two impressions, you can pull the body and the feet away, and and then just simply let the Magic Sculpt set up. And then you'll have perfectly fitting areas where the feet will fit to the tree stump. And of course, you're just going to paint those areas the same as you would the tree stump. See, I've got nice impressions there for the toes. That way the foot literally goes around it. Same thing here with the left foot. I just simply tried to sculpt it a little bit to make it look more like it was part of the tree stump anyway. Now, I was going to leave the tree stump separate from the base, but I decided after test fitting, see, there's a gap here around where the tree stump meets the water. So I decided to glue it in place, and out of all the materials that I've been using so far, I've started off with a Tamiya extra thin, went with the Bondo. I did use some super glue, some Magic Sculpt. Now I'm going to use some acrylic modeling paste. You simply take some of that out of the tube, apply it with a toothpick, or you could use a cotton swab, and again, you can wet it with water. Now here the model is all primered. All putties and glues have dried. I went back and I primered everything in an automotive grade primer. As a matter of fact, I'm using Rust-Oleum Automotive. All the little parts have been primered, the base, the wings, the body, everything. I usually like to let primer set for about 2 days before I decide to do any painting. Now the first thing I'm going to paint is the water. So I want it to be a real murky, kind of marshy sort of look. So I'm using a little bit of the burnt sienna and a pale green. And this color is a little light, so I had to add just a drop of black to that. And then once I did that, I had a really nice, murky, marshy, wet look here, a little marshy water kind of look. That's what I was really going for. I didn't want to use blue or a bright green. I wanted it dark because I knew I was going to end up making it glossy, so it would definitely look more like water. And you just wanted to get it to the right consistency. When it runs down the cup at a medium speed, it's ready to airbrush. Watch as I touch the brush to the edge of the cup. Okay, here I'm using my trusty Badger Anthem airbrush, and I'm airbrushing a nice even coat onto the water. You just want to work carefully, make sure you get all sides, the edges. It doesn't really matter if you get anything on the tree stumps because you're going to come back and paint those anyway. Even if you do get a little bit of the watercolor on them, that's not going to hurt anything. You just want to work carefully and slowly building up that color. No runs and drips. Okay, now the water is painted. Now I'm going to come back and paint the tree stumps. And here you can see I used a very, very dark brown. Many of you may already know, if you've watched my other videos, I do a lot of color mixing. Now here I'm dry brushing the stump. Dry brushing really brings out all of that detail. I still see an awful lot of models on Facebook and other social media sites, and a lot of you guys are not dry brushing. I want to see some more dry brushing, guys. Come on. It's a very important element when painting. You've got a lot of texture that you need to bring out. Now I painted the lizard a kind of a burnt orange color. Now here's the base complete. Everything was base coated and then dry brushed just the way I did the stump. Now here's the close-up of the lizard with the pattern. I just took a small fine detailed brush, painted the eyes as well as the pattern. I painted the lettering in white, and when I glossed up the base, I just went ahead and painted over the lettering. I did leave the lily pads flat. Here's the little cocoon. I base coated that in a tan and then dry brushed it in white. There's a good bit of detail to this base, a lot of nice texture. It's really and truly a painter's dream. Okay, the next thing, of course, is to paint the Mothman himself. And I looked at some reference photos of different moths, and I decided I wanted him dark and ominous. So rather than do a lot of color, I wanted the colors muted. The one consistency in all the eyewitness accounts was a bright red eyes. He had bright red eyes. So I decided to go with a kind of a dark to medium brown color on the body. So I'm airbrushing that. I'm speed drying the paint with a blow dryer. That way it makes waiting easy and you can keep right on painting. Okay, now that the body is painted, I've got the legs, the hands, and even that back piece. It's all base coated. And here's some of the smaller parts. Now what I do is I sometimes trim the sprues up in a closer formation so that you can eliminate all this empty sprue. Now for the dry brushing, I used a burnt sienna, a pumpkin color, and a tan color. And I used a palette, and I use a very, very soft bristle brush, and I'm going to dry brush. So here you go, guys. For you guys out there that aren't dry brushing yet, I'm telling you, you're missing out on an awful lot. You want to really bring out that detail. Just get the tips of the bristles wet with paint, wipe it off onto a paper towel, and then you're going to come back, and when you dry brush the texture against the texture, here's what you get. Notice you can see all that fur that's on there. It makes all those little details pop. See that? Simply using a base coat of brown wouldn't do it. You want to be able to see all that texture. Sculptors spend a great deal of time sculpting all that in there, and you want to bring that out. Now for the wings, I opted for a darker brown and a lot less red or orange in the color. And then I was going to come back, and of course I was going to paint some patterns there that are sculpted in. But the first order of business is to go ahead and base coat the wings in that dark brown. Some nice patterning there, so it gives you some options in terms of color. Now here's the base coat, And you can see the difference in color. That's what I was going for. I was almost going to do the wings in black, and then I thought, no, I'll do them in a dark brown. Now here I painted the patterns. I started off with white and red, and then I took that dark color brown and I misted it over just to sort of mute those colors back. Now I had a little bit of a problem when it came to attaching the wings. The arms actually kind of got in the way. So I had to sort of force it down over that piece, over each arm. It did spread the wings out a little bit, but I was able to get it. That back piece was another problem. The holes didn't quite line up exactly right. You really have to work with that piece in order to get that down in there. The smaller wings weren't a problem. They fell right into the holes that are on his back. Here I have the other parts painted and attached. Those, I don't know what they are, mandibles or whatever they are, they were another problem. I couldn't quite figure out how they went in there. Now the eyes, I started off with a bright silver, and then I used Tamiya clear red. They even had the eyes numbered wrong. 14 should have gone into one socket, and 15 was supposed to go into another socket. I forget which side was which, but they were numbered wrong. So I had to switch them. And again, that's what test fitting does for you. Don't ever just assume that the parts are always going to be numbered right and fit right. Yeah, the eyes, the eye numbers were wrong. I had to switch the eyes around, and that was, of course, thank God, before I even glued them in. I was test fitting and discovered that. Anyway, the model was attached to the base, and he was now complete. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, it's a nice kit. You just have to make sure you test fit everything and check everything before you do any gluing. And you should have a really nice time building and painting this model. So until next time, this is Phil Lister saying, go build a model.